What's up guys, Sagi here and welcome to another Tech Gear Talk. Today we're going to compare two of the best beginner cameras from Canon, the SL2 and the M50. Now the SL2, also known as the 200D, is a fantastic and extremely small DSLR which packs a ton of features. On the other side we have the Canon M50, which is a super compact and powerful mirrorless camera from Canon that offers 4K video. We're going to talk about the strengths and weaknesses of each option when it comes to photography and video so that hopefully I can help you decide which option is best for you. And my goal with every product comparison is to give you a detailed overview of the features of the product in a way that relates to real life use. And if you find it helpful, please let me know by giving it a like and then hitting the subscribe and notification buttons for more camera and tech reviews. Okay, so let's get going. I'm going to get into the details for each aspect of the two cameras, but to start out, I want to go over some overall key features. The Canon M50 has a 24.1 megapixel APS-C CMOS sensor. It uses Canon's super nice dual pixel autofocus system, which is just awesome. It has the brand new Digic 8 processor, which improves speed and performance as well as image quality. It has a 3-inch fully articulating touchscreen LCD and can shoot video at up to 4K at 24 frames per second. The M50's combination image stabilization uses both 5-axis digital image stabilization and lens-based image stabilization. There's a really nice OLED electronic viewfinder, and it has Wi-Fi with NFC and Bluetooth, so you can easily move images to your mobile device. Another nice feature of the M50 is that it has an external mic input. And as a bonus, you can now have full control over the camera for both photography and video using the Canon Camera Connect app. Moving on to the SL2, the SL2 has a 24.2 megapixel APS-C CMOS sensor, and it also uses Canon's dual pixel autofocus system. With the SL2, Canon implemented the Digic 7 processor, which again will help with speed, performance, and image quality. It also has a 3-inch fully articulating touchscreen LCD and can shoot video at up to 1080p at 60 frames per second. Like the M50, the SL2 also has an external mic input, so you can use an external microphone and get better audio. Being a DSLR, the SL2 uses an optical viewfinder. And finally, again, we see Wi-Fi with NFC and Bluetooth, so once again, we can easily move images and video to your mobile device and then have control over the camera with the Canon Camera Connect app. Okay, to start out, I want to talk about camera type. So the SL2 is a DSLR, and the M50 is a mirrorless camera. And if you're not familiar with the difference, let me take 1 minute and explain it. The way a DSLR like the SL2 works is the light passes through the lens and then hits a mirror that's sitting right in front of the sensor. It's then redirected up the camera body where it hits another couple of mirrors, which lets you see the image using the viewfinder. When you take a picture, the mirror in front of the sensor flips up out of the way, and then the shutter opens and the light can hit the sensor. If you're shooting video, the mirror just locks in the open position, and then light continuously hits the sensor. Now in a mirrorless camera like the M50, obviously there's no mirror, so the sensor sits directly behind the shutter and the lens. The sensor is constantly being exposed to light, and when you go to take a picture, it's covered and then uncovered again by the shutter. Now this is the main reason why mirrorless cameras are smaller than DSLRs, because you don't need to have a mirror in there. The lens can be mounted much closer to the sensor, and that's why the body can be much thinner. You also don't need to have the whole prism leading up to an optical viewfinder, so the body can be made much smaller. Now there are some disadvantages too, but I'll cover that whole topic in a more detailed video. Alright, both the SL2 and the M50 have a really impressive 24 megapixel APS-C CMOS sensor, which I think is a great sensor for both DSLR and mirrorless cameras. In general, the bigger the sensor, the better it is. And a bigger sensor means better image quality because it's able to use more information to create an image with more detail and better dynamic range. It also gives you better performance in low light. These APS-C sensors are excellent when you're shooting landscape, portraits, if you're doing street photography, if you want to take it with you while you travel, or if you just do family and lifestyle photography. It's also a great choice for shooting video, creating content for YouTube, or if you're just a hobbyist. It's going to give you really nice and crisp video, and of course, Canon's color science is fantastic. All in all, the 24 megapixel APS-C sensors on the SL2 and the M50 give you really nice performance at a very affordable price. And because these sensors are essentially the same, I'm gonna call it a tie. As far as processors, the SL2 uses the Digic 7 and the Canon M50 uses the Digic 8. Both are great options, but the advantage here goes to the M50 because of the newer processor. Together with a nice sensor, both cameras will give you sharp images and video and good low light performance. Again, I'm going to give the M50 a slight edge here because the newer processor should lead to improved overall image quality. There are several other aspects that will impact your image quality aside from the sensor and the processor, and we'll get to them in a bit. Now, general menu operation is fast in both cameras. Both have very quick startup, and things like image preview and video playback are quick and responsive. One feature that I look for in every camera that I review is continuous or burst shooting. You can just point the camera at a subject, hold down the shutter, and the camera will just keep firing. This is a nice feature if you're photographing kids running around, pets, sports, or any fast-moving subjects. Now, of course, the more frames you can capture per second, the more options you'll have to choose from later on. The M50 can shoot it up to 10 frames per second, and the SL2 can shoot it up to 6 frames per second. So of course the edge here goes to the M50. Okay, next I want to talk about resolution and frame rates. For photography, both cameras offer 6,000 by 4,000 pixel images. So as far as strict resolution goes, it's a tie. For video, the SL2 can shoot at full HD or 1080p at 24, 30, and 60 frames per second. The M50 can shoot at the same resolution options as the SL2, but it can also shoot at 4K at 24 frames per second. So here again, the advantage goes to the M50 because of the additional option to shoot at a much higher resolution of 4K. Now, your choice of frames per second comes down to what kind of look you want your video to have. If you like a more cinematic look, then you go with 24 frames per second. But if you prefer a more crisp and sharp look, then you can go with 60 frames per second. I shoot all of my videos at 30 frames per second because I like to go somewhere in between. Now, if you edit your videos at 30 frames per second, like I do, you can play your 60 frames per second video from either of these and then slow it down by 50%. And that gives you a little bit of an option there to do slow motion. If you want to do additional slow motion, both the SL2 and the M50 have an HD or 720p option for shooting at 120 frames per second. And this lets you slow things down even more, but you are giving up on some resolution. So to sum things up, I'm giving the M50 the edge here when it comes to resolution because of the option of shooting 4K video. I want to mention that this is only an advantage if you actually plan on using this feature. So you should ask yourself if you want to store these larger files, if you have a computer that's powerful enough to edit 4K footage before you decide that that's an advantage that matters to you. Alright, so let's move on to lens options. Now the SL2 can accept both EF and EFS mount lenses, while the M50 uses the EFM mount. This means that right out of the box, the SL2 has a significant advantage over the M50 because you have a much more extensive selection of lenses to choose from. The EFM mount lenses are definitely limited, especially when it comes to really fast lenses. When I say fast, I don't mean how fast the shutter speed can be, but rather how much you can open each lens to let more light in. The SL2 lets me use all of my L series glass from Canon, so I have much more flexibility. Now, if you still want to use EF and EFS mount lenses on the M50, you can buy an adapter from Canon or a number of third-party providers. This does open the door for more options at the cost of having to buy and carry another piece of equipment. I'm still giving the advantage to the SL2 because natively it accepts a much larger selection of lenses, both from Canon and other manufacturers. If you're looking for some of my favorite lens recommendations for each camera, I'll be doing a follow-up video, but for now, I'll go ahead and put them in the description of this video. One thing to remember is that because both cameras use an APS-C sensor and not a full frame sensor, there is a crop factor of 1.6x, which means that you have to take the focal length of the lens and then multiply it by 1.6 in order to get the 35mm equivalent. If you have any questions about this, please let me know in the comment section below, and I'll do my best to explain this in more detail. Alright, next let's talk about the autofocus, and this is something that you definitely want to consider when choosing a camera. And the good news is that both the SL2 and the M50 use Canon's dual pixel autofocus, which is absolutely killer. This is definitely one of the best autofocus systems on the market at any price. For photography, it can track a person using eye detection, which is a super nice feature, especially if the person is moving around or if you just want to reframe your shot without having to change the focus point. Now for video, great continuous autofocus is critical. If you're vlogging and walking around with the camera, you can always set your focus manually and lock it. But when you're walking, you're moving, you're changing hands, and the camera position always changes, and the distance between you and the camera is going to change, which is going to impact the focal plane. And if you're using manual focus while moving the camera around, you're not going to get great results. And a lot of people don't realize how much even slight movement can impact focus. Like I said in the past about Canon cameras that use this system, the dual pixel autofocus system just crushes it. It will automatically detect your face, and then you can just watch it follow you as you move through the frame, and even if you move forward and backwards, it does an awesome job. For the purpose of creating YouTube content, shooting interviews, or just video in general, I think good continuous autofocus is definitely a feature that you're gonna want. Another thing that I can do with both cameras is click on different items on the screen and then easily change the focus. So I can get a really cool transition where in my video I talk about one thing and then I want to shift the viewer's attention to something else. I can just click on that item and then bring it into focus. I do want to point out that for the M50, the dual pixel autofocus does not work when you're shooting in 4K. Instead, the M50 uses contrast detection to maintain focus. And it doesn't do a bad job, but it's not as good as the dual pixel autofocus system. For me, it's essentially a tie since both systems use the dual pixel autofocus and the SL2 can't shoot in 4K. Something else that I love both about the SL2 and the M50 for video and why I think they're such great options is that they both offer a 3.5mm mic input. That's a great feature if you want higher production value because it allows you to use an external microphone instead of the built-in omnidirectional one, and that way you get much better sound. So I can easily connect a shotgun mic or a lavalier microphone to either of these and I'm ready to go. And this is a really nice and compact setup in both cases. It's light and I'll get great video and awesome audio. It's just perfect for vlogging, shooting talking head video, and really any time where you want a more directional sound pickup instead of the omnidirectional microphone that will pick up sound from everywhere. There are a lot of outstanding microphone choices on the market, and I'll put links in the description to some of my favorites. I also did a comparison of some of the most popular shotgun microphones on the market to help you pick a great option within your budget, and I'll link to it up in the corner and again in the description. Now, as far as using a lavalier microphone, I can use a wired lavalier if I don't mind being tethered to the camera, or I can even go wireless if I want. I can connect my Sennheiser AVX with an XLR to 3.5mm adapter to either of these cameras, and now I've got great audio and I'm not tethered to the camera. I can move around and I'm always gonna get perfectly crisp audio. So as far as audio goes, it's gonna be a tie between the SL2 and the M50. Next, let's talk about size, weight, and build quality. These cameras have similar body qualities. Canon definitely focused on creating pretty solid camera bodies with good and secure grips on both the SL2 and the M50. Now the SL2 for a DSLR is crazy light, and even with the 18 to 55, it still weighs under 2 pounds. Now of course the M50 being a mirrorless camera, it's a lot smaller and even lighter, and it weighs just a little bit over a pound with the 15 to 45mm kit lens. As far as portability goes, I'm gonna give the advantage to the M50 because it is smaller and lighter than the SL2. Next, I wanna talk about the viewfinders. The SL2 being a DSLR has an optical viewfinder, and on the other hand, the M50 uses an electronic viewfinder. Now what I like about optical viewfinders is that they give you a sense of being in the scene. Like a good optical viewfinder can also be a great option when you're shooting in very low light, and the responsiveness and resolution don't suddenly drop. On the other hand, an electronic viewfinder gives you a larger view of the scene and it helps with immediate feedback when you make changes to your exposure. I'm not gonna give either one of these an advantage because for me, it's less about which is better and it's more about how you use it and what you prefer. Let's move on to the screen. Both the SL2 and the M50 have a super versatile 3-inch fully articulating touchscreen. It can be flipped and then locked into position on the back of the camera to be used for live view, or it can be flipped again for protection and storage when it's not in use. Now, some of the reasons why I love fully articulating screens is because it can be flipped out to the side, to face up, or to face down. So depending on how you use either one of these cameras, you have a lot of options. If the camera is below you, like on a slider, or if it's on the ground and you're shooting up, you can just take the screen out, flip it up, and then you don't have to be laying on the ground while using either of these. If on the other hand, the camera is, let's say, above your head and you're trying to hold it up and take pictures of video over people's heads, you can just look up at the screen, and again, you can totally see the screen regardless of the fact that the camera is way above your head. So as far as the screen goes, I'm gonna call it a tie between the SL2 and the M50. Moving on, both cameras come with Wi-Fi and Bluetooth and work with the Canon Camera Connect app. The app lets you connect a mobile device wirelessly to both of these cameras and then transfer images and videos so you can quickly share them. In addition, the SL2 and the M50 can use the app to remotely control the camera for pictures. So you can set the camera up and then use your phone as a remote screen to change settings, focus points, and then even take the picture. When it comes to video, both the SL2 and the M50 give you complete control over the camera using the app. You can frame your scene, you can change settings, and then you can remotely start and stop recording. That is such a cool feature, and it's so convenient. It makes being in front of the camera a lot easier. There's no more walking back and forth to start and stop the camera. I can just sit down, move myself or the camera until I get exactly the shot that I want, and then start and stop the video right from my phone. Again, it's outstanding functionality for both of these cameras, so once again, I'm gonna call it a tie. All right, let's talk about a few other features. Both cameras can do in-body time-lapse. It's super simple to use and so much easier for most people than using an external intervalometer and then taking those pictures and converting them into a time-lapse using software. The M50 has 3 specific time-lapse scenarios built in: fast, slow, and slower subject movement. And these options will automatically pick the right settings for the time-lapse shot. You can also adjust those settings if you want to save 3 different presets. Now, if you want a little more control, there's also a custom setting which gives you full control. You can just select the interval in seconds, which is how long there is between each shot, how many shots you want the camera to take, and whether you want auto exposure to be used on the first image and then remain the same, or if you want the camera to auto expose for each picture. The SL2 doesn't come with presets or the ability to save them, so you have to select your settings each time. Again, for beginners, it's nice to have those presets, and at the same time, I think that once you get used to it, you'll easily get the hang of using the custom feature. For time-lapse, I'm going to give the advantage here to the M50 because of the additional presets. Another feature I want to talk about, especially if you're going to use this for vlogging or if you're moving around a lot or shooting handheld, is image stabilization. The M50 offers 5-axis digital image stabilization and lens-based image stabilization. And it combines those two to try to get rid of some of the shakiness you get from handheld footage. The SL2, on the other hand, doesn't have digital image stabilization, and it only relies on the image stabilization coming from the lens. I'm gonna give a slight edge to the M50 because it does give you the option for digital image stabilization, but I'm gonna mention that I don't really use it. And if you plan on really moving around with this camera, you should always use a 3-axis gimbal to get that perfectly smooth and buttery footage. And I'll add some links in the description to a few options that I think would work well for both of these cameras. Next, let's look at battery life. And the SL2 is rated for 650 shots with a single battery, and the M50 is only rated for 235 shots. That's a huge advantage for the SL2, and if you watch my detailed M50 review, you'll see that I definitely recommend buying at least 1 additional battery, if not 2, especially if you plan on shooting all day. So like I said, the advantage here definitely goes to the SL2 because of the much better battery performance. And finally, let's talk about price. At the time I'm shooting this video, there are some holiday specials. So the SL2 body costs $499 and the M50 body costs $579. Depending on when you're watching this video, the prices may be different, but the SL2 should be less expensive than the M50. I try not to look at price, but rather at the value, but if you're simply looking at the dollars, the advantage goes to the SL2. Okay, so both the SL2 and the M50 have their strengths and weaknesses, and that's what makes it hard to say which is the best. It comes down to which features are important to you and how you plan on using the camera. For some people, getting a small and more portable camera and lenses with digital image stabilization, an electronic viewfinder, and an option to shoot at 4K are going to be the priority. For other users, having a full-featured DSLR with tons of interchangeable lens options, an optical viewfinder, and a lower price point are going to sound like the best fit. You can't have everything in any camera, so it comes down to what's important to you. And I do my best to answer every question, so if you have any additional questions, just fire away in the comment section. I'll put some links in the description to where you can buy the M50 and the SL2, as well as some of the popular kits and accessories. And there are always holiday specials and discounts, and those links will be updated with the lowest pricing. If you end up ordering anything using those links, you can help support my channel for free and help me create more content for you, and I thank you in advance. I also have links in the description to the more detailed review of each of these cameras if you're looking for a more in-depth review. I really hope this video gave you a good comparison between the Canon SL2 and M50, and I would love to hear in the comment section which is the best option for you. If it was helpful, please let me know by giving this video a thumbs up, tweet it, share it, and if you haven't yet, hit the subscribe and notification buttons. You can always find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Tech Gear Talk. You know what I always say, buy it nice or buy it twice. Good luck and see you soon.